Thank you, Michelle, for that very kind introduction. It's Egypt's loss and our gain, I think we'll all agree. Thank you also already in April for inviting me to Asia House, and thank you all for coming out today, and particularly the High Commissioner for coming. It's a very appropriate time for me to be talking about this, because not only is my book just out this week, but it was literally just about 2 years ago this week that I got a phone call from President Barack Obama asking me to come into his administration for 60 days and do a strategic review of American policy towards Afghanistan and especially Pakistan. That review is in many ways the genesis of this book and therefore the genesis of this conversation today. It is important for me to say right from the beginning, however, that this book is in no way a statement of President Obama's views or those of the United States government. They're solely my own thoughts. Let me start with where we are today in the American relationship with Pakistan. Where, in a sense, is the deadly embrace on the 4th of February, 2011? Well, it's in a very odd place. There's a discontinuity in our relationship between Pakistan and America. At the public level, the two countries say they are engaged in a great strategic engagement. Their leaders speak frequently. President Obama promises to go to Pakistan this year, and President Zardari will be in America next month. American economic assistance to Pakistan has been tripled under the Obama administration, and military assistance, already quite high, has gotten even more robust. In public, all seems to be well. In private, however, the relationship is fraught with frustration and, in fact, anger on both sides. Let me give you one simple example. Last month, the CIA's chief of station in Islamabad was outed, meaning his name was put in the public domain, and he had to leave the country on less than 24-hour notice. That is an extremely unusual thing to happen to a CIA chief of station, especially in a country which is an ally. But then the next day, the next shoe fell. The CIA more or less put it out in the New York Times that their chief of station was outed by the Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence Director at the ISI, our close ally in the war against terror. Now that's extraordinarily unusual. At the same time, Chief of Army Staff Kayani has put it out in the Pakistani press more than once that every time he comes to Washington, he feels like the most bullied man in the world. Now that's not a term of affection about a relationship. There is growing tension in this relationship. There is growing unhappiness. And in the background, if you listen carefully, there are also warnings of impending disaster. That as bad as it is, it could get all so much worse if a mass casualty terrorist attack occurs somewhere in the United States, postmarked India, like what almost happened in Times Square last May, or a mass casualty attack in India, a repeat of Mumbai. The administration has put it out again on numerous occasions that such an event would lead to a catastrophic moment in U.S.-Pakistani relations. And for those who didn't understand what that meant, Bob Woodward, as usual, helpfully clarified by saying there are 130 targets set in CENTCOM right now. How did we get to such a situation? How did American-Pakistani relations get to a position where you can have a public relationship so at odds with the private relationship? That is, in essence, the subject of the book that I'm talking about today, The Deadly Embrace. Let me begin by saying how important Pakistan is, not just to Americans, but to everyone around the world. Just a few figures. Pakistan is the 6th largest population in the world today, 180 million people. It is the 2nd largest Muslim country in the world in terms of population. Even assuming a significant reduction in fertility rates, Pakistan will probably have 355 million people by 2050, which will make it the largest Muslim country in the world, probably considerably for that. It is the first state created after World War II. It is the first and only state created primarily to be a homeland for the Muslims. It has the fastest growing nuclear arsenal in the world. If not now, soon Pakistan will have the 5th largest nuclear arsenal in the world. And given the new reactors that are coming on stream, it is on a track to have the 4th largest nuclear arsenal in the world. For those of you who don't keep track of these things, you used to be number 5, or may still be. France is number 4. It is the home to more terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Pakistan Taliban, Jaish Mohammed, you name it, than any other country in the world. On every issue that Americans and British think about, worry about, concerned about in the 21st century, Pakistan is crucial. And in this, it is a uniquely combustible country. Because today, Pakistan is in the midst of a severe socioeconomic crisis. What I try to do in the book, what I'll try to do very briefly now, is look at 3 separate strands, or 3 separate narratives, or 3 separate issues, and see how they come together, and how that coming together has led to the situation we're in today. First is Pakistan's own domestic politics. Second is the American-Pakistani bilateral relationship. And third is the development of the global jihadist movement. Let me be very clear about terminology here. Global jihadist movement is in no way an assessment that this movement is Islamist in any way. It is a caricature at best of Islam and is in fact a hijacking of a religion for political purposes. I use the term global Islamic jihad because that is what the terrorists call themselves, and it's therefore a useful shorthand for a very complex movement. A word or two about Pakistani politics, and really only a word or two given the time. Pakistani politics are among the most complex, intricate, and confusing in the world. Pakistani politics for the last 60 years are also littered with assassinations and murders, which are never resolved. Pakistani politics, in a sense, are an Agatha Christie novel in which Hercule Poirot never shows up in the last chapter to tell you who did it. You just have body after body. 2 features of Pakistani politics are important to keep in mind. One is the struggle between civil authority and military authority, and second is the struggle between what I will refer to as a modernist, moderate part of Pakistan, and a part that claims they are an Islamic party. The Islamic Party is divided into many different segments and shouldn't be seen as a unitary factor. Oversimplifying Pakistani politics tremendously, but getting to a fundamental kernel of truth, is that the generals, on the whole, have tended to favor the so-called Islamist parties. And one, in particular, favored them more than others, and that's General Zia ul-Haq. Zia ul-Haq, in many ways, can be rightly regarded as the grandfather of the modern global Islamic jihad. The generals have also built up a huge internal intelligence service, the ISI. When General Zia came into power in 1978, the ISI had 2,000 officers in its complement. In 1988, it had 40,000 officers in its complement, and the pay for them came from the United States of America. Pakistan today is a country severely at stress from both of these factors. But one thing I want to really stress, because I think it's absolutely critical to keep in mind, is that despite this history of repeated military dictatorships, despite all the stresses in Pakistani society, the population of Pakistan has fought repeatedly for something like democracy. The contrast to Egypt today, I think, couldn't be greater. Egypt is a country which we hope now is on the verge of a springtime of democracy, but we haven't seen a fight for democracy in Egypt in the last 60 years. Dictator after dictator sat in power. Uneasy has lied the head of every dictator in Pakistan. And that's an important source of hope and inspiration. The second issue is the US-Pakistani bilateral relationship. If the US-Pakistani bilateral relationship was a TV soap opera, I guarantee you it would be #1 everywhere around the world. It's so dramatic. You have incredible highs, usually built around secret projects with very colorful characters, followed by incredible lows. And this roller coaster goes up and down over and over again, with one constant. The United States always supports the military dictator. We have never seen a Pakistani general in uniform we have not fallen, enraptured in love with. From Eisenhower to Reagan to George Bush, we've endorsed every single one of them. It's one of the most remarkably bipartisan things in modern American foreign policy. I won't go into the ups and downs. If you want to go into the details, I try to lay them all out. The third factor is the rise of the global jihad. In many ways, this is the centerpiece of the book and the product of the other two narratives. It is the global jihad that has been the benefit of this discontinuities in Pakistani politics and America's tortured and tortuous relationship with Pakistan. The modern jihad's roots, as I said already, can be found in General Zia's era in the 1980s. And in the book, I devote a considerable amount of time to the man who actually conceived of the modern global jihad. Not a Pakistani at all, a Palestinian, or Jordanian actually, Abdullah Azzam. Abdullah Azzam was bin Laden's first mentor. He was the co-founder of the Services Bureau, which became Al-Qaeda. He was the co-founder of Lashkar-e-Taiba, and he was one of the major founders of Hamas. He is the trifecta of modern Sunni jihadism. And he has had a major influence to this day on the activities of jihadists around the world. What do I mean by the global Islamic jihad today? The global jihad today is not a monolithic movement. There is no single leader. Osama bin Laden would love to be, but no one takes him seriously as the single leader of the global jihad. But it is a movement that increasingly cooperates on the operational level. And we see that in terrorist incidents around the world more and more, where the Afghan Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and the Pakistan Taliban work together. For example, when they killed 7 CIA officers in Khost, Afghanistan, a year ago. Or in Copenhagen, where they have now 3 times tried to attack the newspaper that published the cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. And it is becoming more and more radicalized all the time. Lashkar-e-Taiba is in many ways the perfect example of this tendency. A party that began with a totally Indian agenda on the 26th of November 2008 searched out American Jews in a Shabbat house on a back street in Mumbai because it wanted to attack the Zionist Crusader Alliance, the targets of Al-Qaeda. Pakistan today, as I said, is a country undergoing severe stress. Luck has not been with the people of Pakistan. The worst natural disaster in their country's history, severe economic problems, and today Pakistan finds itself in a position where it is both a patron of terror and a target of terror. And we should not underestimate the cost Pakistan is paying. We just saw it in the murder of the governor of Punjab. Last year, according to the Pakistan Institute for Peace, there were 2,113 terrorist attacks in Pakistan. Over 3,000 died and 6,000 wounded. That's considerably more than in Afghanistan next door.